Oh, I almost said Taylor. Oh, A.
Taylor is your name?
I know. I almost said my name's Taylor, and I was
My
like,
name is Taylor. No, that wasn't like a
oh,
no,
that's why I
it
was
was
like,
more of like a
yeah. Oh, yes, your crystal ball says, like, I'm like imagining it like
read your
elderly
ball.
man, like being like, oh, yes, so your crystal ball says, like, I'm like, it's ridiculous to imagine that, but yeah. Hello and welcome to Tipsy Book Talks. My name's Ryan.
And I'm Taylor.
And today we're going to be focusing on Jane Eyre. So today we're actually going to be drinking the Tequila Mockingbird's Jane Eyre version called Jane Eyre.
Which we are very excited about. Look how cute they are.
It is so cute.
It's so like, it kind of fell apart, but it's not the cutest drink, but I think it's gonna taste good.
No, okay, so that's the thing is, it's pretty simple. It's not a gin and tonic, but it's kind of like a gin lemon spritzer.
Almost like a gin mixed with like a mint julep.
Kind of, yeah. So that's basically it. So cheers.
Cheers! Very lemony.
I literally, all I kept thinking was,
It's
this
just
tastes
lemon.
like a lemonade. Like
It's just
straight
lemon.
up lemon.
I like it.
All right, I could drink this.
Okay, so
All
pretty
right.
much we're gonna do a non-spoiler and a spoiler section of this. So for the non-spoiler section, quick summary, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte is basically about a young girl named Jane who is growing up as an orphan, and she's just trying to create a better life for herself. So she goes and gets an education, she goes to school, and she tries to become an independent woman and gets a job.
Yep.
And then it pretty much goes from there where it's a lot of drama.
There's a lot of shit.
I can't
that
give you any
happens.
more of like any more of a summary without spoiling something. So
she lives her life. She goes to a house and
She does lots of stuff.
lots of things.
it's
Jane
really
Eyre.
good. But yeah, what would you rate it?
Honestly, this book is something that I thought I was gonna find really hard just because of the beginning. But after you get past like the first, I think it's 6 chapters, I fell in love with it, so I'm gonna rate it pretty high. I'm gonna rate it a 4.5.
I rated it a 4.5. Literally. 4.5.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
But the reason I gave it a 4.5 instead of 5 is actually just because the beginning was so slow.
Yes.
Like, I have picked this book up. It is my best friend Maya's, like, favorite book in the entire world. So she sent it to me like 5 years ago and was like, please read this. And then I've picked it up like maybe 4 or 5 separate times and got through like the first chapter and just been like uninterested. So give it till chapter 6. It really picks up.
Yeah, that's kind of why I rated it a 4.5 as well, because so I had to read this twice for 2 different classes in college, and both times I physically read it because I didn't know audiobooks existed. I physically read it up until like chapter 4, and I had to stop. I was like, I don't know how this is gonna go, because it reminded me very much of Frankenstein. So if you don't understand what I mean, go check out our video on that, because it's the same setup, but it was hard to get to. But once she kind of moves on into adulthood, that's when I'm like, oh, thank God, there's more to happen.
Once she gets to like her first like actual place of work that isn't the school. Like,
Yes.
I think once we get past the school, there are some parts in the school that I like, but the second that she actually like gets to the house and becomes a governess is when I'm like, okay, 10 out of 10.
But yeah, so let's actually get into it, because I really want to talk about
Yeah,
this.
spoiler section. So
Yes.
please leave, come back, read the book, and then come back.
Anyway.
Bye.
Spoiler section, let's cheers into it.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Chug.
Oh.
No, it's too sour.
Oh, that is like, that's like a sour ball.
Whoo, spoiler section. Okay.
Spoiler section, yeah.
So what?
Favorite?
Who is your favorite character, Rayan? What is your favorite character?
What is your favorite character? My favorite character, I have a ton. And that's why it's really hard, because I'm like, okay, so as the book goes on, like not in the beginning, but like as it goes on, my favorite character becomes Jane, because I really am like, good on you. I'm so proud of you for like growing and maturing and not being this spoiled little selfish brat that you start off as, which like realistically, like she's dealt with a really hard hand from the beginning, like where we are introduced to her. So I'm like, I understand why you act the way you do, but I'm like, you're a spoiled little brat. And then I love her. But I also am in love with Bessie because Bessie's like her real mother. Like, she actually treats Jane like a child and is like, you don't do these things. Okay, these things you do. And then she's like, when she sings that song to Jane, like in the beginning, I'm like, oh, she really like feels bad for her. But also like, okay, who's the girl that died?
I think it's Hannah. It starts with an H.
It's
Helen?
I think it's Helen. Helen Burns. Yes, I love Helen Burns. Yeah. I feel for her because I'm like, Helen Burns means so much. And like, we're going to get into themes, but like, she is a very religious person that I'm like, okay, sure. But I'm like,
very humble.
She is like just so like the ideal of like who you should be as a person. I'm like, of course she would be taken young because like, why wouldn't that be happening? But also, I was like, who else did I write? I didn't.
Okay, so I definitely do want to talk about Jane, but I'm going to start with Diana. So Diana is the sister, or like one of the sisters that Jane ends up with after she like leaves Mr. Rochester's, and she stumbles around for a while and ends up with St. John, Diana, and Mary. But Diana's like the older sister who is just like this like sweetest, really kind lady. She's super genuine. She's super smart. She loves to like, you know, gain knowledge and learn new things, and like, she is one of the most motherly people ever, even when Jane is like nothing to her. She actually like really looks after her and is really like sweet and kind. So I'm like, I love her. I love her so much. And then with Jane, I actually really liked her when she was a kid.
Really?
The thing is, it's so hard for children to stand up for themselves.
That is true.
To be like facing like abuse like that, like most of the time kids like keep it to themselves and they don't like fight back. Parents are supposed to advocate for children, and if she has no parents and no one's advocating for her, like she had to do it herself.
Yeah, and that's why I'm like, after hearing you say that, I'm like going kind of switching over into like least favorite characters. My least favorite character was Mrs. Reed. When Mrs. Reed had her like coming to of being like, I treated her like an awful, like to Jane, like I treated her awfully because of like these reasons. I'm like, you know what? I'm so proud of Jane for actually standing up to Mrs. Reed because she straight up was just like, she was a bully raising tinier bullies. So she does somewhat regret treating Jane, but it was literally in like her last dying words of like, I do regret this, and then she dies. Like, it's like one of those things where she's like, I think maybe like, if you look at it personally, she could have just been like, God, see, this is like, I'm trying to be remorseful, and then she like dies in hopes of getting into heaven type situation.
Yeah,
but, like,
it was one of those things where she was like, I can't regret it because I hated you from the second that you were born. And, like, literally, I can't regret it, and I'm sorry that I can't regret it. Like, that's what she was sorry for. She was sorry that she wasn't a better person.
There are so many characters in this book, too, that it's like,
so many.
Shit, okay, who do I really not like in this book?
And they're all, like, in different, like, sections.
Yeah.
All in different parts of Jane's life.
Jane's life is like 4 different sections, so you're like, shit, who do I not like of like each section?
Yeah,
like,
I feel like there's a villain in each section, and there's a hero in each section. And
I'm not gonna lie though, somebody that I genuinely was like, I don't like, and not because of their personality, genuinely because I was like, I'm slightly terrified of this person, is I guess like Mrs. Rochester or whatever.
Bertha Mason.
Bertha Mason terrifies me. She's like somebody that I would see in the middle of the night and be like, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die.
Also, I don't know if anyone else had this issue, but even after we like saw who Bertha Mason was, I thought that her and Grace were literally the same person, and I had this crazy theory, like I learned afterwards that wasn't true. Grace Poole was Mr. Rochester's wife, and she was just like acting as a servant because like she was still there and she just had to be there, but they didn't love each other, and that's just what I assumed it was.
Interesting.
And so she was trying to like get back at him because he didn't love her. So that's kind of what I thought it was, and I thought that's why she was getting paid so much, was because like he was just like, we're just gonna keep it a secret and I'm gonna do whatever the I want.
We're gonna keep our relationship a complete secret, but like I'm gonna pay you.
Yeah, and
that's
then
hilarious. I'm sorry, I don't
because
mean to
then
laugh,
when Bertha Mason shows up, like, and she is like described as having like really pale skin and dark, like blue lips, and like her face is all like
it's
that.
like purple.
I thought that Mr. Rochester had just like tried to kill her because he wanted to be with because he wanted to be with Jane. So I thought, like, when she first showed up, like, and burned Jane's stuff, I thought it was because he tried to suffocate her, like, the night before.
Yeah.
But
shit.
Obviously that was wrong, but that's what I was thinking.
I was going to say that would make a pretty sick ass story.
Yeah. 10 out of 10. And then once I realized I was wrong, I was like, what the f***? I had to like
wait, hold on.
go back a few pages. Like, I don't know.
Okay, who are your least favorite?
So mine, I have a few, but my main one is actually Sinjin. I really liked Sinjin in the beginning. Like, first of all, he is the one who rescued Jane from poverty. He's the one who brought her in.
He, like, openly was like,
he has, like, this, like, really beautiful line in the beginning where he talks about, like, shunning people in poverty and who are we to do that, because he is, like, a godly man. And I was like, that's, like, I really liked him. And then the more and more we get to know him, the more I see, like, how selfish he is and how, like, he has this one-track mind of, like, what I am doing is correct all the time. Yep. I have God's will. And there's so many religious people like that. Like, it kills me because it's like, how do you just think that you are completely right all the time and that, like, you can just boss people around because of that? Yeah. So when he proposes to Jane, he's like, this is God's will, and if you deny me, you are going against God's will. Like, I hated him after that. I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
I really wanted to like him, but you can't treat people like that, and you can't guilt people into doing what you want and use it as, like, a cover of, like, yes, this is the godly thing to do.
Exactly. I was like, that's not...
No.
No!
Don't do that.
Just don't!
But that does bring me into our first theme, which I'll just get right into.
Yes.
There is a huge theme about religion going on, and, like, basically Jane has this fight with being, like, a religious godly woman and, like, doing what she thinks is best for her, and it feels like there is this, like, almost like this parallel that she's on where she's like, I'm going the right direction, but I don't know which side I'm on.
Yeah.
So I thought that that was super interesting. She talks about religion a lot, especially, like, after she falls in love with Mr. Rochester and then leaves him. She's like, I saw him as an idol. He was just something for me, and now I'm getting back to God. And there's, like, this kind of portrayal that Charlotte Bronte does where she's like, okay, when Jane's life is going really bad, she turns to God. But when her life is going good, she focuses on, like, the now. Yeah. So I thought that that was really, really interesting because... Yeah. It's a huge theme all the time.
I want to bring into really quick the fact that I was like, I brought this up to Taylor when we were talking about Jane Eyre, like, over the phone, well, before she came down, but I was like, the fact that Jane is only 18/19 at the time that, like, she meets Mr. Rochester and is, like, falls in love with him and all of this stuff, and he is, like, twice, if not, like, a third of her age type situation where it's like, he is well beyond her age, that I'm like, oh no. The fact that
she never had a father.
I genuinely think it's her upbringing. A lot of
psychology issues.
She had a shit ass childhood growing up that, like, growing into an adult was hard for her because she was, like, surrounded by this, like, authoritarian asshole, like, godly figure.
Her teacher, pretty much.
Yes, exactly. The dean of the
secretary.
School. Yeah, exactly. Whoever he was, he was a huge hypocrite. And then that was, like, I guess her, like, fatherly figure, that it was like, she didn't get the attention, I guess, that she needed. And so when Mr. Rochester came in and was like, you're slightly okay, she was like, I found a fondness for him. And I was like, ew, no. Like, honey, just because he, like, gave you 2 minutes.
He treats her a little bit like John Reed did.
Yes, but that was the thing, is John Reed was straight up, like, physical assholeness to her, whereas, like, Mr. Rochester was, like,
sometimes
emotional.
Like, when she was gonna leave him, she was like, and then he grabbed me so forcefully by the arm that I, like,
okay, but, like,
I couldn't even let fear in, like, that type of stuff.
John was straight up like, I hate you, blah, like,
that's true.
Mr. Rochester's like, don't leave me, I love you.
It was abusive, though.
It was more emotionally abusive because he would, like, say things to her that I'm like, bro, that's, like, not okay. And you're like, the fact that Mr. Rochester went into his quote-unquote relationship with Jane into, like, I'm going to make you jealous of this girl that I have no intention of being with in order to get you to fully divulge your love for me is the fact that I'm like, that is baseline emotional abuse.
It is interesting, though, that, like, we still kind of root for him.
Yeah!
I don't know what it is. I wonder if it's just because he's described as being ugly and, like, being, like, an underdog.
Maybe.
But
Okay.
I don't know. So let's get into the next theme.
Yes. So basically something that I had brought up to Taylor while we were still listening to it.
We've done a lot of chatting about this.
I was about to say, we called each other a lot because we had a lot to already say prior to this video. But something that I want to bring up is the fact that ghosts and, like, apparitions were brought up a ton. So in something that, in college when I had to read this, something that was brought up was the fact that Bertha's laugh always kind of came up whenever Jane was having, like, a real revelation. And how one of the big things was the first, I think, time that she heard Bertha's laugh was when she was going on about how women are being, like, how women are being pressured into these societal roles of, like, pertaining to, like, being women who stay at home, who do all of these certain chores, who don't have thoughts and opinions, whereas Mr. Rochester has kind of, like, praised Jane for always having an opinion about issues and never kind of belittled her for it, and always been like, oh, well, this is weird, but okay. And so but he, like, belittles her for it, but he also praises her for it. And Jane kind of goes into this soliloquy about it, and then she hears Bertha's laugh, that I'm like, that's really interesting. But there's always, since the beginning, so since Jane was a child, the Red Room, there was a ghost image of her uncle. And then she goes into, oh gosh, what was Thornfield? Yeah. She, like, transfers into Thornfield. She becomes the nurse, I guess. The governess. That she works there, and there's a talk of a ghost. And so from childhood, she's, like, a little worried, like, oh my gosh. But she doesn't actually understand that Bertha is a person there, that she's not actually a ghost. And then the entire time, there's always a mention of, like, Mr. Rochester saying, like, oh, I thought you were a phantom. And even at the end, when he kind of thinks her to be, like, a ghost when she shows up again after he lost his sight. Like, I'm like, okay, what is this?
You know what I did notice, though? Like, whenever she talks about ghosts, it's, like, the way she thinks about it is, like, ghosts are people, like, protecting her. So when she goes off on Mrs. Reed, she's like, basically, like, my uncle is here haunting this because you're treating me so badly. He's here to protect me. He's here to get back at you because his dying wish was that you treat me as one of your own. Yes. And that's not what you have done. Yes. And then when she goes to, like, I think Lowood, and, like, all of these people are dying except for her, and she's, like, talking a little bit about ghosts, she's like, she doesn't get killed, and she's like, I am being, like, sheltered. I'm being, like, almost like the, what do they call it? The cloak of God or something like that, where, like, she is being protected by these, like, supernatural creatures. And then same thing when she goes to Thornfield, when it is a person, she is described as a demon, but it's, like, a real person. So it's, like, almost like she seeks the supernatural, and she seeks, like, this other world where she fits in and is protected, whereas, like, the real world and actual people are out to get her.
Well, I was gonna say, even with, like, Bertha even being a phantom, like, or a ghost in that sense, like, Bertha would signify kind of like a coming to, which I know Taylor brought up to me of, like, basically the entire plot of this book is basically a Grey's Anatomy. Like,
it is! It's literally, well, it's a fairy tale that was written by Grey's Anatomy, like, writers, because it's, like, all of this amazing stuff happens, but it's always accompanied by something that is bad.
One of the, like, big turning points was right when it was the second time after Bertha laughed that Jane goes out with Mr. Rochester, and Mr. Rochester proposes to her, and she says, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, this is gonna happen. And right when that happens, there's a huge storm. Like, the biggest storm that has ever taken in, and then they were like, oh, we gotta go. And I'm like, storms, like, especially rainstorms, are always signifying of bad things coming. So the fact that I'm like, oh, this is a huge turn of events, that there's a huge storm on the way, right when they get proposed to, I'm like, okay, what's gonna happen?
Wedding ain't working out.
And everything after that, Bertha shows up. She tears apart the dress. She shows up to Jane as a phantom. Like, Mr. Rochester goes into what actually happened. And then all of Jane's, like, life kind of unfolds from there. I'm like, okay. But I was like, even then, like, basically back to what I was saying, Bertha's laugh is kind of a signifier to Jane as, like, hey, don't be so happy with what's going on because something's gonna be coming. And I'm like, ooh, yeah.
That is interesting too, because right when she hears her first laugh, it's right after Mrs. Fairfax is like, there's no ghost here, or no stories ever told. And then it's like, immediately she hears this like
she's
terrifying
like, what
laughter.
is this low groaning laugh? Like, can you imagine in the, like, somebody's like, nothing bad happens here, and then in the background you just hear,
there's no war in Bossing Say.
And all of a sudden you're like, did anybody hit? No? Okay.
Have you watched Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Yes, it's been a long time, but yeah.
I did see some parallels with Jane Austen, but then I also saw some with Samuel Richardson, which I know Jane Austen, like, got a lot of, like, her works, like, she, like, studied him a lot and, like, read all of his works. So I'm wondering if Charlotte Bronte did the same thing, where she, like, learned a little bit, because there is definitely some correlations to Pamela.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah, so it's interesting. That's, like, I don't love that book, but if you want to read it, there are a lot of parallels to this book. I think we could literally go on for, like, another 40 minutes, but we're going to leave it here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please pick this book up. Like, we read a lot of books, and we don't always recommend them, but this one, 4.5 stars from both of us.
From literally both of us. Like,
that says something, right, Anne? It hates me.
I was about to say, I am hard to, like, actually read and listen, like, to Austen or, like, to anything else. Like, the Bronte sisters actually released, like, a bunch. Like, there's also, like, Wuthering Heights and, like, all the stuff, which we're probably going to get into at some point. But I was like, definitely read Jane
You're gonna
Eyre.
love it.
It is a f***ing trip of a book. So I'm like, please read it.
And it gives you, like, those winter vibes, but also, like, brings in the fall vibes of still having, like, these Halloween, like, dark ghost references. I just think everyone should read this because it's really good. Yes,
it is a lot to get through. Get through the first 6 chapters and then go from there.
Yeah.
But anyway,
give it time.
Thank you. We finished our drinks.
We did. We would cheers it.
This is the first drink I think we both finished after
on camera.
Yeah, literally on camera. But thank you so much for watching. Definitely check out our Instagram at tipsy_book_talks because we post literally everything there. Yeah. But also stay tuned for our other upcoming I almost said Halloween. Please stay tuned for our other holiday videos that we have coming up. We have a ton lined up, so
yeah.
Anyway,
also like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. We are almost to like 100. I think we are 25 away from 150 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. We are working our way up there, but
slowly climbing. Please help us out.
We love you.
We love you guys. Thank you. No, we're not cheersing on empty glasses. That's bad luck.
Why is that bad luck?
Well, cheers on water.
Cheers. Cheers. Hydrate.